Welcome to the Dissecting the Wisdom of Shaltazar episodes. My name is Jeffrey Eisen. I'm a spiritual life coach, the channeler of Shaltazar, and an energy intuitive. In these episodes, my collaborator and friend Mark Lane and I will be picking a particular message in each episode that we will be reviewing, having a conversation about, and dissecting the wisdom from. The messages from Shaltazar are very high-level master teachings, and it is key to peel them away, dissect them, comment on them, and discuss them in order to get the greatest value. We hope you'll be intrigued, we're confident you'll learn, and we know you will benefit. And welcome back to Dissecting the Wisdom of Shaltazar. My name is Jeffrey Eisen, and I am with my good friend and collaborator, Mark Lane. Welcome, Mark.
Hello, Jeffrey. How are you today?
I am doing really well. And today you have chosen, I believe, two messages that are somewhat related. Which ones have you chosen for us to dissect?
Sure. I chose Learning to Hear Your Messages from the Higher Power and Stillness Speaks.
Great choice. Interesting that you chose those two, because before we got on this chat, I was mentioning to you that those two were part of the original 16. When I started channeling Shaltazar and wanted to share them with the world, I thought maybe a great way to do so was put it on a CD. And I took 16 messages and found someone that had a recording studio in their basement, and they recorded my voice and we put some original music behind it. And these two messages were part of those original 16. And what drew you to those messages?
Well, I think it was our discussion our last episode when we were talking about who is Shaltazar, and the conversation kind of centered around how you receive the information that Shaltazar is broadcasting. And I guess that kind of stuck in my mind. And as I was browsing through the messages, I noticed these two, and they seemed to kind of go hand in hand with how you described tuning in wisdom and into the messages. And then this idea of transcribing or translating what you were interpreting or what you were picking up into, words and paragraphs and things that you could share with other people.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a bit of a theme in the early days of my channeling where I guess I was being given a crash course in how to connect to the invisible world, how to connect to Shaltazar, because both of these seem to be around the same theme. And one of the things I did notice is that they repeat a lot over and over again. And so in these messages about how we connect to that inner voice, to our intuition, to our sixth sense, whatever you wish to call it, there is some themes. And let me ask you, what stood out to you in terms of the advice Shaltazar was giving for how we could connect to that voice, that inner voice, that higher voice, whatever you want to call it?
Sure. I think the common theme between the two messages is the idea of practicing stillness. It's in both messages where they say that learn to feel surrender, practice stillness more often. In the stillness, the mind will be asked merely to transcribe or to translate what it's picking up on. And that was kind of the thing that sort of spoke to me is, our minds tend to be so busy, and people always talk about intuition and tuning into your intuition. And I always felt like I didn't have any intuition. I didn't feel like I was ever getting any guidance from anywhere ever. And when we first met, you reminded me, you're getting the guidance, you're getting the message, they are communicating with you. You're just not paying any attention. And so I think that idea of stillness and stopping the constant mental chatter is a really valuable tool to be able to tune into this sort of knowledge and wisdom.
Yes, and they talk on numerous occasions about quieting the mind and opening the heart. And I thought about it as I reread this message and re-listened to both of them. What does that mean? It sounds kind of trite, open your heart, but it is consistent with what Shaltazar has been teaching. It's moving to the feeling consciousness, to feel more and think less. And you want to get more into that sensory, as I think we talked about in the last episode. episode, getting your messages from this higher power is a very sensory experience. There's the clairaudient, the clairvoyant, the clairsentient, and the claircognizant. So getting into a sensory place where the mind is not controlling things is vital, is very vital. And in one paragraph in Stillness Speaks, it says that become comfortable with the nothingness, make it your friend. Beyond the nothingness lies great riches, riches beyond your comprehension. Don't imagine them or they will disappear. Don't anticipate them or you will never experience them. Simply move to the void and feel comfortable there. Be still. Feel the stillness, for it speaks loudly to those who truly listen to it. And I mean, those are words, but share with the listeners some of your experiences when you've been in that void, when you've been in that nothingness, and when you feel the stillness. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, yeah. Obviously, I'm a regular meditator, and I enjoy those times where my mind is not operating and I can just be still. As a writer, that turning off the thinking part of the brain and letting the impressions of what I'm writing about come to me, it's almost a sort of channeling in and of itself, I guess.
It definitely is. And you and I have talked about it before. It definitely is. And sorry to interrupt. I want you to come back to where you left off, but I really want to reiterate to listeners, and this happened to me, we think that connecting to our intuition, to the higher power, is something, magnanimous. It's out there. We're going to hear God start to thunder and all of that. It's very subtle. And so certainly I know you write from that channeling place. You write from that stillness. And I think you would agree, it's very subtle. Sometimes you're not even really sure, where is this coming from? Is my mind making it up, or am I channeling something bigger than myself?
Right. And I think our concept of this has been kind of spoiled by Hollywood, because, I always think about, the 10 Commandments in the burning bush and God talking to Moses, right? It was this big dramatic event that happened. And I really don't think it works that way. I think it's the reason that they say the stillness speaks is because you almost just get kind of it's difficult for me to describe, but it's almost just a little nudge or a little, oh, okay, this makes sense to me now. It's just sort of a very under the consciousness sort of awareness, something coming to you that's making sense to you. And the more you learn to kind of expect that, the more it happens and the more you hear it. It's like, and this is a stupid example, but I've been working on my house and finishing my basement, and so I've got tools everywhere, and I'm doing 3 things at the same time, and I'll set down a pencil somewhere, for example, be like, I just had that in my hand, what the hell did I do with it? And so I start walking in circles and looking for it, and then if I stop myself from the activity and just be quiet for just a second, I'll go, oh yeah, I put it over there. It's that sort of a process, I guess, that is not dramatic, and it's not overwhelming, and it's not voices in your head, and it's not images in your mind necessarily. It's quiet and very kind of in the background, I guess.
Absolutely. And it is a good example. It brings to mind, the example that I'm sure a lot of people have experienced. And, you are trying to think of the name of a person or the name of a movie or the name of a book. And the harder you try, you say, oh, it's on the tip of my tongue, I can't quite remember it. And then you just walk away frustrated because you can't remember it. And then later that day, out of nowhere, in pops the name of the person, the name of the book, or the name of the movie. And it's like, oh, why wasn't that there when I really wanted that name? And I think that's just another example of that surrender, of that letting go, of that stop trying so hard. It's somewhat counterintuitive because we are taught, as human beings, that in order to attain something, you really have to try hard. But when it comes to connecting to the higher power, when it comes to hearing your angels, your guides, whatever you wish to call them, it is more around surrender. It is more about letting go. And both of the examples you gave and the one I gave is exactly that. When you stop trying, when you stop anticipating, when you stop pushing, then bingo, it just pops in.
Right. Yeah. And this is why I like these 2 messages in parallel, because you can hop back and forth and see the same advice in both of them. You just mentioned, kind of the idea of a paradox or trying too hard. Well, in learning to hear your messages from the higher power, it mentions take a deep breath, for as we speak, you are trying too hard to comprehend. You are trying to figure it out. And then Stillness Speaks, it says any wanting or anticipating simply pushes it away. Wait patiently. You assume when nothing comes that nothing will come. That's not necessarily correct. So they're kind of saying the same thing, that it's in the trying that you're holding yourself apart from what it is you're trying to get.
It's interesting you say that, because all of these messages, although we discuss them and dissect them individually, although I channeled them individually, they are a body of wisdom. They are not necessarily separate. They are all together, because just as you said what you said, it reminds me of the first message that I channeled called Oneness, and it starts off by saying, in the searching and seeking you will not find. So they continue to repeat these insights and these wisdoms over and over and over again, because it is in that repetition that we are finally going to get it, but not get it intellectually, but get it at that deeper knowing level.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like the wisdom is like a tapestry where they're all really intertwined together. Like, use an example, piece of fabric, a towel perhaps. If you tug on one of the little loops on the towel on one corner, it shrivels up on the other side. So all of this knowledge seems to be intertwined and connected in sort of like a fabric. And so it's all part of the same thing, but there are, there's a left corner of the towel, there's a right corner of the towel, so they have their own distinctness, but at the same time, they're all part of the same fabric.
You mentioned, before that you're a great meditator, and I know you are, and you're very devoted to that practice. How can we help the listeners get that meditating experience out in their daily lives? Because it's one thing to be meditating and to allow the stillness to speak to us, but sometimes we sure would like that intuition in the middle of a job interview, in the middle of a discussion with our family or with our spouse, our partner. There are lots of times throughout the day that we're not meditating that this stuff could come in handy.
Right. Yeah.
Any recommendations on how we can get to that?
I guess a couple things come to mind. I think that a skill that has been lost by humanity is the ability to listen. We're always so connected to and excited about our own opinions that sometimes we don't really listen very well. We giving, an ear to the person who's talking to us, but we're already anticipating what we want to say next. And I think if you learn that listening skill with other people, it will also teach you to learn to listen to yourself. In kind of going along with that same idea, I read somewhere, and this is going back many years, I got the advice to pretend that you are sitting on your own shoulder and going through your day watching yourself. And it was kind of a technique for establishing awareness. And awareness, or that a little bit of a disassociation from you and your thoughts, kind of gives you a unique perspective that allows you to detach a bit from the thoughts and be a little bit more of an observer of what's going on. And that observation technique, I think, is also a way to kind of tune into, some of these things that are coming to you.
Bang on. Of course, there is a message from Shaltazar called Becoming the Observer, which is, again, in this same theme, which is exactly what you said, detachment and becoming the observer. Watch yourself. That observer, they say, is awareness, and awareness is consciousness. And so that's the formless part of you. And as you were talking about listening, I think you're bang on. There's that line that goes, listen to understand, don't listen to respond. And if you sort of dissect that a little bit, you'll realize that listening to understand is a very, very different listening than a listening to reply. So as I am here listening to your words, I am so fully immersed in your words. And although there were a couple thoughts that came up that I wanted to share, I released from that, because if I hung on to those thoughts, then I would stop listening to you. So you have to, and it does say, by the way, that trust and patience is really, really important. They say, now practice often, when the time to hear your messages is right, you will, but faith, trust, and patience is required. There are messages for all of you when you're ready to hear them. So, as that example, as you were saying what you were saying, it sparked something in me, but I had to let go of the obsessive mind wanting to say it and trust that if it was something I was going to bring up, it was going to be after you were finished talking, and I had to go back to listening intently to what you were saying, right?
Right.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. Why don't you close your eyes for a sec?
Okay.
Connect to that nothingness, connect to that void, and just share with me and the listeners what comes through you.
I feel an excitement about what we're doing together and what we're sharing. It feels like we are working on a kind of a formless, shapeless project that is going to have great benefits both to us and to others. I guess that's the sense that comes through me right now.
Beautiful example, because what I'd like to point out to the listeners is that sounds pretty abstract, but that is the way the universe communicates with us. I like to say it's like a treasure hunt. So what you have is the beginning. Interestingly enough, you used that word tapestry before. You have the beginning of the tapestry, right? And I'm not sure whether this tapestry is going to take minutes, days, weeks, months, or years, but if you allow the universe to keep feeding you the tidbits of wisdom, I know that the tapestry will take shape. So just something that the listeners may not be aware of, that when you get that first dribble, when you get that first communication, it's so easy to judge it. One of the lines says, the mind must be content to merely transcribe what comes through you, no judgment of the message, and definitely no judgment of the translation. And that's exactly what you did, Mark. I asked you for something. It wasn't necessarily related to what we're talking about, but that was what was coming through you, and you didn't judge the message or you didn't judge the translation. And if you can have that trust, then I can pretty well guarantee that it will keep building, right? But it would have been so easy for you to say, oh, well, no, that's not what I'm supposed to be delivering. You need to trust the fact that that's what was coming through you in this moment. You have to really get out of your way if you want to hear those messages from the higher power.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, getting out of your way, because I think that's where getting to that place of stillness is. It's getting out of your own way and letting what's out there come through.
And it does need practice. I know I used to in the beginning when I was learning to connect a bit more, I used to play the game of trying to find a parking spot in a busy parking lot. And, now with COVID, we don't seem to have busy parking lots quite as much, but they will come back. And so if you're, in a busy parking lot at a sporting event, a shopping mall, and there's this frustration, how am I going to get a spot? Just surrender, let go, and just drive wherever you seem to be drawn to drive. Many a times I have this sense of driving up a lane that there's someone ahead of me. And, my wife says, well, why are you pulling up here? There's that car ahead of you or two cars ahead of you. And sure enough, the car ahead of me keeps moving and I start to see a backup light and bingo, there's my spot, and the other guy missed it. And so looking for parking spots is kind of an interesting exercise to try and hone that connection to the higher self. Another one is just taking some time, if you're in your neighborhood, if you're on public transit, you're in your car, just don't have a plan. Just allow yourself to go wherever you're led to go. That's how subtle these communications are. And it's really important to build up that muscle, just like at the gym. If you don't build up your connection to that inner voice, if you don't build up that connection to your intuition, it'll never get stronger. So, start with those little things that aren't as important for the mind to be so involved in. Another one is think of an individual. And this one's tricky because, basically you think of that individual saying, I want to hear from that individual. And once you do that, the mind is going to want to figure out a way for that person to connect with you. But once again, surrender is so important. So you let go and you say, gee, I really would like to hear from Mark today. But then you let it go. Right? You let it go. And I guarantee you will hear from Mark today or whoever it is you want to hear from if you've got this right. Don't get frustrated when you don't get it right. It just means you're trying too hard.
Right. You can't try.
So counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
But it's worth it. I know you would agree with me, and hopefully the listeners will. This is worth it. And in times of difficulty and challenges that we're going through, this is an amazing resource that's available to all of us. So I highly encourage people to start practicing, listen to the messages of Shaltazar, listen to any meditations you can, practice quieting the mind, opening the heart, getting into your senses, and don't get frustrated when it doesn't work. Just keep practicing because it is very counterintuitive. It's when you least expect it, you're going to get this download, this communication from above, and you're going to wonder, wow, this is really amazing.
Right.
Any final words, Mark?
No, just be still.
Thank you for saying that. Again, I wanted to bring this up because it's one of my favorite lines. I'm not sure which of the messages it's in. I hear it in my mind all of the time. And earlier in this episode, I wanted to say it, but I forgot about it. And you reminded me of it, that the line from Shaltazar is, be still, be more still, be still again. Mm-hmm. And the repetitiveness of that really really emphasizes that the stillness. It's not just be still, it's be still, be more still, and be still again. So there was an example of where the universe brought me that thought that I wanted to share that I forgot, and you were the deliverer of that message. Thank you very much for that.
Glad to have been a tool of the universe.
Thank you once again, Mark. I love doing these with you. Listeners, tune in to all of the Dissecting the Wisdom of Shaltazar episodes. Mark and I really enjoy bringing it to you, and hopefully you find it of great benefit. Until next time, love and light to you all.